So I like what he does here. He offers up, here's where I'm coming from on this. I'm using the statement of, and remember this is the emailer's words. I should probably write up here, just so people aren't confused about what I'm reading here. All right, email from viewer. He says, I'm using the statement of ego is anything that restricts a person from realizing, exhibiting, and growing his or her authentic self and its Christ-like transformation. Please feel free to assist me on my takeaway on what ego is if it is missing the mark of what you're explaining in your vids. This is absolutely good enough to be actionable. Okay. Maybe that could be improved upon, but I don't think it's worth taking the time to do it right now because that's actually pretty good. We can work with that. So what we want to work on, I want to take you back to a diagram that we had in our provisionism video. And I want you to imagine that this blue area is the ideology where you feel comfortable. You're comfortable, like I grew up Baptist, some independent Baptist, some Southern Baptist. And so it's very comfortable for me to think like a Baptist, very comfortable for me to, at least for a while, it was to give advice, directions, and make decisions based on how a Baptist is supposed to think, right? So that was comfortable for me. I did not realize at the time, notice this statement down here, it says, to which you are really captive. Whatever you're comfortable with is actually what has you captive. So that could be a question that you ask yourself. Am I really comfortable over here? You're probably egoically attached to whatever you're comfortable with. So I have a few things listed in here: Calvinism, Provisionism, Mormonism, Catholicism, Jehovah's Witness, Baptist, Methodists. They're all the same. There's no difference between any of those things. Okay, they're all proposition based. None of the propositions point to anything real. You can throw them on the trash can. Doesn't matter. All right, wad them up, throw them away. There's also a rivalry component. Oh, we got to debate. There's an us-them mentality, which ties into the rivalry. And they operate on an orthodoxy heresy spectrum, which is usually propositionally defined. Remember, orthodoxy is just a fancy word that means group think. We do not advocate group think here, so we do not operate on an orthodoxy heresy spectrum. Heresy to us is somebody that unnecessarily causes division usually for ideological reasons. Somebody who demands ideological purity is the heretic, whereas the lowbrow plebes are thinking that that's the orthodoxy, and they have it backwards. Those are the heretics. It was the Calvinists looking for ideological purity who are burning all the witches at the stake in Salem, Massachusetts. Okay? And they wind up not even being witches. Okay? So if somebody is talking in terms of an orthodoxy heresy spectrum, you want to get far, far away from them. They don't know what they're talking about. And if it was in their power to do so governmentally, they would have people executed for religious reasons. Mark my words, they would. Okay? It is in their personal Overton window. They are smart enough to recognize that it's not in the societal Overton window, so they don't advocate for it, and they wouldn't admit to it. Okay? But anybody who advocates purity of doctrine, pure ideology, that kind of thing, if they could get away with it, they would sure enough execute you for religious reasons, and they would not bat an eye doing it, and they would think they were doing God a service. So that's the kind of people you're dealing with. Now, this is you on your motorcycle of life. And what I tell people, if you still have plenty of places to go, vroom, you have plenty of places to go, you're not running out of room, you just keep at it. Keep being a provisionist or a Mormon or a Calvinist. Those are all the same thing. Keep being that. Keep doing that. And if you find complete fulfillment in your provisionist Mormon Calvinism, Jehovah's Witness, whatever, if you find complete fulfillment and that it's providing you everything you need to make all the right decisions, do all the right things, live all the good life, be authentic and virtuous and godly and all that, if you think that you're getting that traction to do all that there, by all means, you keep doing that. okay? And turn these videos off. You're only going to find sin and vice in all the words that you can't, propositionally disambiguate. And you're just going to find contradiction and sin and vice and error in every word that we say here because you can't see clearly. You're blind as a bat. So if you have plenty of traction, you have plenty of movement in your worldview, you're a Baptist, you're a Methodist, and it's serving all your needs. Turn these videos off, turn this channel off, unsubscribe, and go do that. And enjoy it. Have at it. Serve God there. Just give it all you got. Bam. Go do that. No hard feelings, by the way. I'm not going to write you a strongly worded letter talking about how ungodly you are, okay? God can be worshipped in the fullness of any stage of development. And if you're never going to come out of stage 2 or 3, that's fine. It really is. It's really fine. Just don't be antagonistic against those of us who are no longer there. Go do your thing. We'll do our thing. And when you run out of traction, when you run to the edge, and that thing no longer serves your purposes and no longer provides you with agency that you need to do what you think is the right thing, then you can come back to Beyond the Fundamentals. And then we can help you. We can't help you now, though. Can't help you until you reach that point. Okay? So something else that you might call this is hitting rock bottom. You have to, part of the ego death is to absolutely hit rock bottom. And if you are trying to facilitate an ego death, it's like trying to hit rock bottom to me. It's kind of like spending all your money on cocaine and ecstasy until you have no money or job or family left, and you finally have to wake up and start doing things better. I mean, like, no one tries to hit rock bottom. People hit rock bottom because what they're doing doesn't work. And that's how an ego death comes. It comes like that. It's not something that you can orchestrate. It's something that comes through failure. And Jesus said that it's difficult for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of heaven. Why? Why did he say that? There's nothing about money specifically that stops you from following Christ. The problem is, the more money you have, the more likely you are to be attached to things that money affords you. And the more you can insulate yourself from hitting rock bottom. Okay? If you have, $500 million in the bank, you can do a lot of stupid stuff and still have plenty of agency and still be plenty insulated from the consequences of your actions. You can do a lot of non-agentic stuff. You can be a jerk to everyone. You can not build your relationships. You can get fired from your job or not have one, or just make everybody mad, tick everyone off all the time. You could do that. And you have all this money insulating you from the consequences of that, so you never really have to feel it. And so that's one of the reasons why it's difficult for a rich person to enter into the kingdom of heaven. Somebody who has fewer resources is going to hit rock bottom faster, okay? So if you are a Baptist, if you're a Catholic, you have a lot of what you might call social resources. Your ego is attached to this institution which claims to go back to Jesus and the apostles. And you have all these historic church history reasons and historicity behind the things that you do. Your beliefs and practices have all these big historic ideas attached to them. And so as long as you're in that, you are going to be insulated from hitting rock bottom, because as long as you're attached to that, all of that has to hit rock bottom before you do, before you can, you see? Now, for some people, this happens. In 2019, it was discovered that 700 I think it was minors, might not have all been minors, but 700 people were sexually abused in the Southern Baptist Convention around 2019. Okay, that's terrible, and I'll bet you that institution for them hit rock bottom for them, and they're out, and they should be. And as terrible as something like that is, at least maybe hopefully it caused them to separate from the institution egoically, separate that attachment. And of course, we're all familiar with the abuse scandals that happen in the Catholic Church, which could also cause somebody to recognize how destitute such an organization is, and that there's no business anyone has being emotionally identified with that kind of institution. And you think, well, I'm calling these institutions out. You have to realize they're all the same. They're all the same. Just because something terrible happens to a particular person in one doesn't mean the other ones are any different. Okay? So as long as you have traction, as long as you have purchase in your worldview, to make decisions, to be agentic, to have procedural knowing, to have participatory attunement in what you think is the arena, which is really a VR landscape, it doesn't really exist, then that needs to break down. You need to come to a situation in your life where that no longer fits the bill. And as long as you think that ideology or institution fits the bill for you and helps you and makes you agentic and gives you discernment and all that, you're egoic, and just, you got to stay there. But that's the problem. You got to stay there till you spend it. You see, you gotta be the kid at the fair who spent all their tickets but still wants to go on rides, and you realize, oh, I made a mistake. You have to come across a real life serious situation where your worldview fails you. And then you have to realize that it has not just failed you in one circumstance, but it failed you in a long series of cascading circumstances that offered you the simulacrum of virtue while you made decisions for which you would be paying the consequences later, adding up. And yes, that interest does come with compound interest. And you learn that the hard way. You're like, wow, what was I thinking? So you have to come to the edge of your worldview. My Baptist, independent Southern Baptist background worldview and all my values came crashing down in a cluster of events that I would say probably all culminated in my own divorce. And there's a lot of other events that led up to that. Going all the way back to, I got divorced at the age, I think I was 39, 38, somewhere around there. And so in hindsight, I can see a cluster of decisions, a cluster of cascading decisions going way back to a few years before I even got married to start with, where I was making bad decisions that were in perfect alignment with the independent fundamentalist Baptist value system. But they were wrong. I thought I was doing right. I thought I was being a good little boy. I was not. I was perpetuating the wake of suffering that was started before I came on the scene and would come after me. I have a book in front of me. This book is a new prop. This book is The Descendants of Thomas and Samantha Abercrombie Thompson. Okay? This book, I am on page 101. As is my dad, my brother, my sister, my mother. There's my dad. All right? So I can see my brother, I can see me. It's a lineage and ancestry book. This is the book that I was referring to where it demonstrates I am the 40th generation of ordained Baptist ministers in the line of Thompsons. And here's some of the documentation of that. There's my name right there on page 101 on section 6.7. I was at Marion Military Institute at the time. I was not yet married. Now I could be egoically attached to all this. And up in the middle of this, in the middle of when I was being listed in this book more than 20 years ago when it was published, I was in the middle of making all kinds of right and good religious fundamentalists, don't wear any booty shorts decisions for my life. And they were all terribly wrong. I was so misled. I was so wrong. And it took another almost 20 years to start to see that. Okay. So having a failure in your life, what could happen here? Say this guy, he's a good Baptist, he's a good Catholic, whatever. He comes across a situation that his worldview does not prepare him to be properly agentic in. He can go to delusion. He can double down. Be like, well, I didn't do it right. He can double down on his Catholicism. He can double down on his Baptist heritage and try it again and try to make it work and stick to the rules anyway. Well, it's about duty. It's not about how you feel when you wake up. It's about duty. And you can come up with all kinds of post hoc rationalizations to justify the paradigm and live in denial of the fact that it and or you failed. And that's where I had to come to. I had to realize either I was doing it wrong or it was wrong or a combination of the two. And I had to throw it all up in the air and re-ask all the questions and be willing to re-ask all the questions. And not for the point of getting answers, because that's a fool's errand, but for the point of asking the questions. And I'm not done asking them, by the way, and I never will be. And if you start to grow, you will not ever be done asking the questions either.